The world and all that's in it has been torn to shreds. In the crackling rubble that rains from overcast skies like pebbles kicked over a rocky edge on a hike, our perception of Earth is taken, swiped in an instant, replaced only by a cold and colorless amalgamation of floating reminders that at some point, life as we know it had existed. Maybe that it could still exist, if not for that enormous floating thing drawing near into the ruins. There is no explanation for what this is. At least, none that anybody who sees it could ever hope to understand. This thing, this nightmarish mass which exudes only the essence of evil, the power of destruction, it just is. Our world has become an unsolved milk puzzle, one whose pieces have been scattered without rhyme or reason. In all of this, in the oppressive, overcast sky, stands alone a figure whose stature defies her inner fear as she stares into an abyss that has been staring back at her long before this moment in time. This is impossible. This can't be happening. The tears won't stop as poor Madoka Kaname begins to understand that no one person could ever stand up to something so powerful, so overbloated with ceaseless destructive energy. Madoka sees this moment of cosmic destruction, and with nothing else left in her power to do, begs for it to stop. That's when Madoka Kaname is offered a choice.
You have the power to change this destiny, all this tragedy, all this destruction. You can change it if you want. The power to do so lies within you.
Make a contract with me, the creature offers with hopeful innocence, with sinister, candid clarity, and to become a magical girl. What you're about to see is the opening cutscene for the 2012 third-person shooter Spec Ops: The Line. I would consider The Line to be a deconstruction on par with what Studio Shaft pulled off with Puella Magi Madoka Magica, and an interactive experience which is both harrowing and important. If you haven't already played Spec Ops: The Line, I'm sorry. The game has been delisted from Steam as of early 2024, and physical copies are quickly becoming harder to find. I wish you the best of luck, but unfortunately, unless you're here at a very convenient future time in the game's history, or able to travel back in time, it's very unlikely you'll ever be able to experience the game for yourself, and even less likely that you'll be able to go into that experience blind. As such, you can expect heavy spoilers moving forward. Spoilers that you will have to uncover for yourself in large part, but spoilers nonetheless. The following footage is not for the faint of heart, and comes directly from the game as recorded by those who had access to the title before it was removed. Video sources shall all be credited. Ultimately, it's important to keep in mind that everything you're about to see comprises the only part that its collective community can agree on. What you're about to see are the only moments we can definitively describe as real.
Can't shake this guy, Walker! Hit the brakes and keep her steady! You out of your mind? Trust me! matter! Just keep it steady! Take us in!
Into the storm? Are you nuts?
Guess we'll find out!
I don't think it's controversial to say that most people tend to think of military shooters as all being cut from the same cloth. Turn yourself invisible with the power of camo, and gear up to sink as much lead as possible into your virtual country's virtual enemy of the year until the next annual Call of Duty, Battlefield, or Medal of Honor asks you to dip into your wallet for the next year's worth of similar guns, maps, and vehicles releases for your good old camo decaled Xbox. Nothing new, nothing challenging, nothing that's going to do much of anything for you outside of giving your fingers something else to play with while you sit on your couch and ignore your partner. There's nothing wrong with them, but there's nothing particularly noteworthy about them either, at least for the most part. These oft-mocked modern-day military shooters, known also as tactical shooters, can trace their roots back to two games in particular. 1999's Medal of Honor for the Sony PlayStation, a game funded by Steven Spielberg, of all people, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, released 1 year earlier in 1998. Of the veritable barrage of military and tactical shooters which fired back in consequence to the increasing popularity of the new genre, one of its most forgettable but nonetheless somewhat fondly received titles was a little game called Spec Ops. Spec Ops Rangers Lead the Way, to be exact. The game chose to hone in the idea of simulation, focusing on the danger and level of casualties present within the missions of the United States Army Rangers, hence the game's subtitle of Rangers Lead the Way. The moderate success of what is today largely recalled as a 7 out of 10 experience led to the creation of, and I'm not kidding here, 7 games in the span of 3 years. That's output that would make 2014 Scott Cawthon take notice. Then, after 2002, the franchise just disappeared completely. It would remain dormant for another 10 years, before being revived in 2012 as a mediocre third-person tactical shooter that fans of the 1998 original played, enjoyed, and never spoke of again. At least, that's what we would be saying if that 2012 revival hadn't been Spec Ops: The Line. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering to yourselves, hey Octo, what are you going on about some random shooter game for? Aren't we talking about Madoka Magica? Why am I even here, anyway? This isn't the video I clicked on. All good questions, of course, and since you're here already, somewhere you are not supposed to be, I suppose I owe it to you all to give you at least a little hint as to what's really going on here. This isn't the only hidden section of this video. As a matter of fact, it's one of the shortest hidden segments. I won't tell you how many of them there are, only that if you're paying attention, you'll easily discover the rest. If you're able to find them all and watch the video and its hidden segments in order, you'll find the end result to be a much more fulfilling experience than just watching the video back on its own. As for what to do to get back to where you were before, and as to how exactly you collect your grief seed and close back up this pitiful labyrinth of mine, you'll find the link in the description will take you exactly where you need to go. As for why I bring up Spec Ops: The Line, a third-person tactical shooter seemingly unrelated to Madoka Magica, all of that can be traced back to one simple word. Deconstruction. Ask anyone who's seen Puella Magi Madoka Magica to tell you what makes it so special, and without fail, you'll get the following single-sentence review. Madoka Magica is a deconstruction of the magical girl genre. Ask them what that means, however, and suddenly the confident responses of Madoka fans begin to tremble, rupture, and fall apart. I'm not going to pretend like I'm immune to that Achilles heel of anime reviewership, of course. I too have carelessly thrown around the word deconstruction with the same mindless delight of an ape who's just thrown his own feces into the $1,000 handbag of a particularly well-off bystander, completely unaware that I was part of a growing micro-problem within anime discourse. Completely unaware that every time I said the word deconstruction, I was ruining Madoka Magica just a little bit more. Now let's not cast judgment here. We've all said it at one point or another, so none of us are any better than each other. We've all cursed on accident when stubbing our toe, we've all been a little irritable when we haven't eaten enough, and we've all said, at one point or another, that Madoka Magica is a deconstruction of the magical girl subgenre. None of us were the first to say it, and none of us will be the last. Hopefully because after today, we can all comfortably say something else about it that is far more original and unique to each of us, if slightly less academic or concise. Now that begs the question, though. Why do we need to? What's so wrong with anime fans identifying who among their ranks survived the desu-apocalypse of anime fan-shaming by using the tried-and-true deconstruction description of Madoka in place of a salutation in the university hallway on our way to class and seeing who responds with a Miiverse quote? I'm Octo, and today in my corner we'll be delving into what exactly a deconstruction is, where it isn't, and how exactly the idea of genre deconstruction ended up in the same verbal cesspit as the correct use of the words literally, minion, and the state of Ohio. This is Octo's Quarter, and we're diving deep into Puella Magi Madoka Magica. But more than that, we're diving deep into what it means to deconstruct a genre. Welcome aboard. Just to rip the band-aid off, first and foremost, let's start by plainly stating what exactly a deconstruction isn't, with a particularly relevant example. Of the plethora of reasons Madoka Magica could be considered a deconstruction of its genre, tone, more specifically tonal whiplash, is not one of them. We can't say to one another, dude, it's like if Sailor Moon had blood in it, and like death and stuff, because Sailor Moon would still be the definitive magical girl show, even if it had blood. In fact, I'm pretty sure it did have blood. I don't know that for sure, I've never seen Sailor Moon, it just seems like the kind of show that would get Yu-Gi-Oh'd in translation. You know when the original version of a show has like a bunch of darker themes and then those aspects get removed in the localization process? Yeah, most people would call that getting the 4Kids treatment. I call it getting Yu-Gi-Oh'd. That's what getting Yu-Gi-Oh'd did. Anyway, the majority of us, myself excluded, were introduced to the Mahou Shoujo subgenre thanks to Sailor Moon, at least in the West, but the actual origins of the genre go a lot farther back than fighting evil by moonlight and doing some stuff by daylight. I don't know, man. I didn't watch Sailor Moon. Maybe I should watch Sailor Moon. In any case, and even if I don't watch Sailor Moon, if we truly want to understand what Madoka Magica is and why it is, we'll first need to figure out what it is exactly the series is taking apart in the first place. After all, we can't very well deconstruct something that's never been, in the first place, constructed. That being the case, let us begin our journey into Madoka Magica with, if not a truly deep dive, then at the very least a decent dive into what a magical girl is, and the patterns that had come to define the genre in the years preceding 2011. The magical girl subgenre, depending on who you ask and where you went to ask it, has a lot of different birthplaces. It could be 1966's Maho Tsukai Sari, or Sally the Witch in English, which was technically the first magical girl anime to air on TV. It could be Himitsu no Akko, since the manga for that predates Sally the Witch by about 4 years, having started in 1962. I've even seen some sources list Princess Knight as a magical girl prototype of sorts, as the first Maho Shoujo style story, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't believe any of this. I think the genre really started to become a genre once Toei Animation started calling it one with the introduction of what they called their Magical Witch Girl series. That's Toei Majo series, in Japanese, by the way. Now, I promised myself, before even going into this video, that I wouldn't get stuck on a little side tangent like this for as long as I would if this were one of my Kyoto Animation reviews. So to make a very long and very complex topic very short, or at least short enough to be a little more manageable on my end, we'll just say that Toei more or less invented the genre themselves with heavy basis on the works that came before. Trust me, if we didn't, this video would be at least twice as long as the Nichijou review was. Generally speaking, a magical witch girl, or magical girl as it would more generally come to be known, is a protagonist who uses magical powers to navigate daily life while also handling a secondary but highly consequential higher purpose. American examples of this are therefore series like Hannah Montana. Think about it, it counts, and Wizards of Waverly Place. The Japanese internet further categorizes these by splitting them into two distinct types, dependent on the source of their magical powers. Either she's born with it, or she's had to use some Maybelline. In other words, someone or something gave it to her. Madoka Magica, therefore, belongs to category number 2. Between their inception in the 1960s and 2011, when Madoka Magica came out, at least 82 anime falling under the magical girl umbrella were released. And remember, that's only accounting for the mainstream stuff that got an anime adaptation. There's a ton more out there, I assure you, especially since they didn't really stop making them after Madoka Magica anyway. They just kind of stopped making them lighthearted or enjoyable after that. Magical girls generally have to go to school still, have weekly enemy battles with whatever the series villain of the week is going to be, and they almost always involve some kind of small animal companion, like Cerberus in Cardcaptor Sakura or Billy Ray Cyrus in Hannah Montana.
Yo! My achy, breaky back!
Under that description, Madoka Magica has everything you'd want and expect from the genre. Madoka Kaname, a character we'll go into in a bit here, meets a strange animal creature named Kyubei who offers her a wish in exchange for becoming a magical girl and fighting weekly witches. That's all pretty standard stuff, and it's all presented with your standard level of moe cuteness and middle school innocence. Are they in middle school? I'm pretty sure they're in middle school. Let's double check that. Yeah, okay, they're in middle school, definitively, confirmed. Mitakihara Middle School, to be exact. Now that means any of you weirdos drawing smut of these characters you're in some trouble, I'll tell you that much. It's not exactly as though there was any reason to think about that in Madoka's case anyway. Yeah, it has some freaky Studio Shaft backgrounds, but that's nothing a quick analysis can't explain away. I think one of the more interesting ones is the amount of chairs pointed directly at Madoka's mother's bed in this scene. It seems weird, but it's really just supposed to be a metaphor for how many people depend on her and rally around her. There's at least one chair for each member of the Kaname household, as well as ones for each other character she mentions while discussing stories from work or characters familiar with her daughter. It shows how dependable she is and how many people look up to her, as well as implying how important she is on a literal level for having given birth to Madoka Kaname. Now that last bit will probably make a lot more sense a little later on. Up until about the third episode, pretty much everything about Madoka Magica makes perfect sense for fans of the magical girl genre, with some minor hiccups in there that we'll come back to in just a moment. Of particular note is the way the character of Mami Tomoe is introduced. Her heavenly theme music, Credens Justitium, translates to English as believing in justice or faith in justice. And that's exactly the kind of glowing aura the song itself gives off when she appears. The lyrics of the song aren't Latin at all, though. They're actually made up of a sort of pseudo-Italian the composer just made up. This is less fun for me, because it's much harder to decode that way, but if you just stick it in Google Translate and see what comes out, you get this. Thanks, Google. I'm sure there's something in there somewhere. Madoka Magica is exactly the kind of show to make you decipher some sort of cryptic code in order to understand it, after all, but we'll get into that stuff later. For now, the point is that Mami is exactly the kind of bright spot Sayaka and Madoka need to elevate otherwise boring, to them at least, I enjoy slice of life, day-to-day middle school drama and give their lives renewed senses of purpose. And as such, she immediately becomes just about everybody's favorite character. She's kind, nurturing, and as a result, even as a viewer, you can't help but look up to her. It's also important to note her bright color palette and her more mature-looking character design. It's clear to me, at least, that from her very introduction, the show is doing everything it can to make Mami Tomoe our beloved guide to the world of being a magical girl. And she does a fantastic job of doing just that, introducing us to Kyubey and explaining the various rules and responsibilities that come with being a magical girl. That their power comes from their soul gems, that the more power they use, the more their soul gem dims in color, and that the only way to restore them is by using grief seeds, which are dropped by defeating witches every now and again. The villains here are called witches, by the way. Don't worry, we'll go into those a little later, and in a lot more detail, I promise. And finally, Mami explains the danger caused by witches that go left unchecked, that their curses go unseen by those who aren't magical girls, and that that's what makes them so dangerous to people, given how negatively they can affect the mental health of those around them, and the natural disasters that they can cause. Where they come from, however, isn't fully understood, at least not by Mami. Overall, Puella Magi Madoka Magica sets itself up to be a pretty standard, if especially lighthearted, take on the magical girl genre, handled in a fantastic way by a fantastic studio. Sure, the end credits in the first 2 episodes are a little oddly cryptic sounding, but that's only really an issue if you speak Japanese. I didn't in 2013, so I didn't notice that my first time. And as such, I'm not going to spoil the surprise of what Madoka's first ending theme actually means to those who don't already know. I'll just let you look into it for yourselves. The weird thing about episode 1 specifically, the thing that would strike most people who didn't know that Gen Urobuchi was writing this ill at ease, is this girl here, Homura Akemi. Now, Homura Akemi is the main reason that watching Madoka Magica for the second time is a much different experience than watching through it the first time. Now that's because, as an audience, we don't think to ask why she just knows already who the nurse's aide for her class is, how she knows where the nurse's office is well enough to be able to walk the aide there, or any of the other oddly specific things she does that make it clear she's already deeply familiar with her surroundings, despite having only just transferred into the school. Madoka Kaname, on the other hand, does notice. She asks about it.
How did you know I was the nurse's aide for the class?
She doesn't get a response, and immediately there's this crushing sense that something isn't right with her. We may or may not shake off this feeling that we've seen her before. The idea is that we assume both parties have dreamt of each other, that the opening segment we saw at the beginning of the episode was a mutual experience, because that would explain pretty much everything in a way that fits with the typical occurrences of the magical girl subgenre. That's when Homura Akemi does something very interesting.
Madoka Kaname, do you treasure the life you currently live? And do you consider your family and your friends precious?
She asks Madoka Kaname if she's happy with the life that she has. And in order to answer that question, we'll need to understand just who exactly this Madoka Kaname really is. Madoka Kaname is a regular girl. She dreams of becoming something special, of doing what's right and being a hero for others to look up to. She comes from a stable home, in a stable family, and she's got a good group of friends who love and support her. Sure, there may be the occasional middle school drama or especially tricky test, but on the whole of it, Madoka Kaname is happy. Watch only the first episode of Puella Magi Madoka Magica, sans cold open, or even avec cold open, and you'll find that the show goes out of its way to make this clear, mostly by way of comedic familial conversation and light, gentle backgrounds which run parallel to the laid-back warmth of the music playing alongside their varied and unmistakably unique design. These are what we think of when we think Puella Magi Madoka Magica, Episode 1. Desiderium, Post Meridie, Sina Felix. Pronunciation be darned. Desiderium for its serene, relaxed interior sound, for the way it sounds like laying on the couch after the house has been cleaned but before anyone shows up for Thanksgiving dinner. Listen closely. You can practically hear the sun shining in through the windows as the curtains flow gently in the breeze. Post Meridie for sounding exactly and unmistakably like the cobblestone path next to the babbling stream that Magica's cast innocently walks each day on their morning commute to what has got to be the most futuristic middle school I've ever seen. Holy crap! Finally, Sina Felix for the emptiness it conveys so beautifully and carefully, for the way it sets the stage for what the series co-creator and scriptwriter Gen Urobuchi once falsely promised would be a light and heartwarming series. The name for such a tune, Sina Felix, can loosely be translated from its original Latin to mean happy stage. The sound of an empty room, the warm, woody sound of the guitar strings, followed by the echoes of empty dust flying through the air. How fitting that the happy stage sounds empty. When we know that the scenes which shall on it play are not without, when definitively defined, just a freaking nightmare castle of suffering and at least a couple splash park water buckets of tears just to wash it all down. Madoka Magica, even on an auditory level, is completely different the second time around, as is, really, any good deconstruction of a genre. Of course, the most subtle of these is the bright and happy Post Meridie, or In the Afternoon in English. No, I'm not going to explain that one. It's boring if I give you all the answers, especially if I do it here. And the least subtle, ergo the most direct, is Desiderium, the calm piano piece which accompanies the warmth of a clean and well-lived-in family home. When translated into English, we might say that Desiderium best describes the feeling we now, in our not-dead language of English, describe as desire. The obvious question being, of course, what desire is associated in the scenes it accompanies? Keep that title in mind next time you watch the show, by the way, and make note of every time you hear it. You'd be surprised how much it changes the viewing experience to know what the music is trying to tell you and when exactly it's trying to say it. I'm sorry, by the way, there's going to be a lot of Latin in this video, assuming you couldn't already tell. I wouldn't say I speak Latin, especially since it's a dead language by definition, but I have studied Latin, at least a little bit in the past, and that's going to be very useful here, because Madoka Magica is obsessed with hiding information in Latin and German, I guess, but I don't speak German, so I'll take points where I can get them, is what I'm saying. For more information about my past, of course, you can feel free to watch my Kyoto Animation review series, a suggestion I offer only because the upcoming second episode of that series is highly likely to contain further information on my journey with the Latin language, which will not be divulged here. That is hint number 1. The first 3 episodes, in fact, fall under that same farcical umbrella, that everything is normal. And Madoka Magica is a standout magical girl series which delivers its tropes like caviar at a thrice Michelin-approved restaurant is delivered by the hand of the world's finest waiters to the world's richest diners. You wouldn't be wrong to take one look at the art direction, say you've seen Sailor Moon, and move on to the next Netflix recommendation. Well, okay, you might be wrong, but the decision wouldn't surprise me. That's more what I meant. All of this magical girl fluff, the innocence of school life mixed with the hinted-at higher purpose, the animal companion, all of what we see in the first 3 episodes of Madoka Magica, even the darker aspects, like the fact that the witches are capable of convincing vulnerable people to place a sentence-ending period before the natural conclusion of their work, all of this isn't anything new to those who have been paying attention. The only standout here is one Homura Akemi, and even then, what at first sound like cryptic warnings, questioning her happiness, asking if she loves her family, are later revealed by Mami to be rooted in cat-like territorialism and insecurity because of the titular Madoka's titanic potential, should she make a contract. Mami is this girl here, by the way, for those of you who forgot or weren't paying attention in the first place when she was introduced, or who happened to be here early. Yes, her actual name is Mami Tomoe to be exact, and she mothers the new magical girl recruits, Madoka and Sayaka. So the name is probably intentionally similar to the English word mommy. And that's all we're going to say about that here. Be as immature about it as you like, just don't expect me to play along. So really, the joy in Madoka Magica's first 3 episodes comes down to incredible execution of classic magical girl tropes. Nothing deconstructive about it. But as I'm sure you already know, a deconstruction very rarely starts out like a deconstruction. At least, not in the way that would make it obvious what's really going on your first time through. One of my favorite examples of this principle is found in something totally unrelated to Madoka Magica, in a video game, simply titled Moon. Moon is an RPG for the Sony PlayStation 1, and as of now, thankfully also the Nintendo Switch and Steam, which begins in a way that might sound familiar to you if you've ever played one of these RPG things before. There's a massive lore dump at the very beginning, which I'm displaying in Japanese because I'd really rather not give you the chance to read it for yourself here. There's a king in need of aid from a no doubt handsome knight. There's this thing.
God, do you see this woman? Do you see her face? What is this creature?
Beyond this point, I'm going to be spoiling the first part of Moon. If you want to go into the game blind, now is the time to leave. Same goes for everything else in this video, really. Whatever I talk about here, you can assume from this point on that it's gonna get spoiled, so keep that in mind moving forward. Spoilers ahead, and copious ones at that. Basically, if you want to play ReZero and you want to know what it must have felt like for Subaru Natsuki in a world he didn't understand, Moon is for you. Now, that should be enough to get you at least interested in the game. Other than that, I'm going to spoil just enough to ruin the first experience, so skip to the next chapter if you'd rather not hear about Moon for now. As you play Moon for the first time, you'll notice that it looks a lot like an RPG Maker game, which is to say, very generic. Trust me, you'll forgive these visuals once you realize how engrossing the gameplay is. About an hour in, you'll explore the first major town in the game, collecting hidden armor from a drawer in some rando's house, talking to enamored folks who can't wait to be saved from evil, and just generally enjoying being the hero. There are some who oppose you, of course, a moving rock here, a monster there, but thanks to the power at your disposal, the armor and weaponry you have on hand, there's not much that will faze you at this point in the game. A few hours later, that's going to change. At 8 hours and 27 minutes into Moon, you'll find yourself in front of a home invaded by something ungodly. A creature called the Paragon blocks your way and threatens the life of an innocent girl. Obviously, he has to be dealt with. But the fight against the Paragon is one of the most infamously difficult in the entire game. The Paragon, you see, is a master of illusion. The only way I managed to beat him in the end was with a lucky combo of dodges and critical hits. The game only gets more intense from there, with bigger monsters and a dragon that looks, well, like this. As the game draws near unto its final moments, after hours of intense questing, and with you at the peak of what you can do,
Hey! Stop playing that game and go to bed.
Moon does something really interesting. In the anime community, you'll often hear about the 3-episode rule. Give it 3 episodes, and you'll know for sure if you're watching a show that you like or not. That rule exists because of Madoka Magica. Toward the end of episode 3, just as Madoka has decided to become a magical girl, Mami Tomoe breaks down in tears. For a while, she's been taking Madoka and Sayaka with her to battle witches, bringing them into the witches' labyrinths, the wretched hiding places invisible to most, to show them what life is really like for a magical girl after she saved their lives from a witch just a few days ago. She's not crying here because she's scared, or because she can't handle what's going to come next. Mami Tomoe is crying because, for the first time, there's someone to talk to about all this. When magical girls are born, that is, when they are chosen by Kyubey to become magical girls, they're allowed one wish that is sure to come true, no matter what. Madoka and Sayaka are free to wish for whatever they'd like, but Mami never had that luxury. Dying in the flaming wreckage of a car in the highway where her parents gasped their final breaths, Mami Tomoe saw the creature and begged it to help her, to give her a way to live. Kyubey obliged, and Mami has since been bound to the laws of a magical girl, a lonely magical girl, a girl who has no parents and no family, a girl who exists only so that other people can have that which she lost forever in the flames and twisted metal chunks of her former family's former car. As far as we know, Mami never cried for them. Now, in the moment where others have agreed to join her, others who had a choice and who want to do what's right, her tears won't stop. Suddenly, Mami's empty life isn't quite so empty anymore. And so, triumphantly, and with a renewed sense of joy and motivation, Mami is going to kill the witch, and the group will celebrate another incredible day. Not just free of the witch's curse, but now, together, free of loneliness as well. What happens next is going to tear the entire genre apart from the inside out. I don't know why exactly, but there's something about Debussy's Clair de Lune that always manages to make me feel something. I love classical music in general, but even so, there are some songs, like Clair de Lune for example, that have always been special to me. I can still remember when I realized this, but that's something to discuss in a Kyoto Animation review, not here. For now, just know that it's difficult to describe how important this one singular melody is to me, and that I used it intentionally where I needed to in the Nichijou video. The music I used in certain segments of that video was very important, actually. That was hint number 2. Even in something objectively terrible, like Psychic School Wars, Clair de Lune still manages to make me feel something. So, when I suddenly found myself in a quiet old house, in Granby's house, as a quiet, beautiful rendition of Clair de Lune played in the background, I'm sure you already know that I felt something in that moment that I can't quite explain. Like I was home, having returned to a place I'd never been to before. That feeling came at a time when, well, let's just say it was especially welcome. Suddenly, you find yourself in a strange kind of witch's labyrinth, surrounded by things that you thought you knew. But now, as you wonder, daunted and afraid of the slowly worsening feeling that no one can see you, that no one can hear you. If you've ever understood, if you've ever known, truly known, any of them, who am I? What happened to Mami Tomoe at the end of the 3rd episode of Madoka Magica? What's happening now? Why am I ghostly, see-through, transparent to all around me? Why, in an RPG full of characters, a game that looks so different now than it did for all those well-spent hours, Why can't I talk to anyone? Why can't anyone see me? Then, all of a sudden, someone can. Granby can. Granby and her dog, Tao.
Ton Benjamin, c'est toujours ce... Toi. C'est toujours ce d'abord. Sur les tombées des peuples.
They all thought
Les canards, voilà.
I was dead. But that's not really true. They aren't seeing clearly. After all, I'm right here. I'm here, aren't I? I'm speaking, I'm sharing my thoughts. I exist! Granby knows that. She lovingly, like all grandparents do, sits in her chair and is ready to hear all about it. She has the kind of wisdom that only living for a long time can truly provide. The kind of wisdom that I can only dream of having. She asks me to tell her all about it. The first person to acknowledge me, to know who I am, asks of me nothing but to talk to her, to tell her everything. Once I've tuckered myself out, I walk slowly over to my old bed, the bed that I was always allowed to sleep in when I visited my Granby's house, and I fall asleep. Clarity doesn't come when the first sign that I'm on the right track shows up definitively in my dreams. Clarity doesn't come when I put on what Granby tells me are my old clothes, when she asks me where I've been, when I can't answer her because, truthfully, I don't know where I've been. When an armored monster crashes through the walls of a house in the neighborhood, I realize in horror that I don't know where I am now, either. Now, though, at the very least, I am visible. That much at least, is clear. There's a bird in the town square. I like him. He calls me Bub and stuff. I get the feeling that he's not exactly my friend, that if I broke down and cried like I did when I talked to Granby earlier, that he wouldn't be there for me the way that she was. The way these people talk frightens me. I hear English in their doubtlessly gibberish words as I speak to them.
Having a stroke, endearing weakness to or what I don't happen property. I'm the reason they wrote.
I want to know these people, but I'm nonetheless afraid of them, as I walk with no direction in a place that feels familiar and different all at the same time. Services require payment, but outside of the money Granby gave me for bread, I haven't any to spare. So I buy the bread, and I walk around trying to get my bearings. I don't get them. I see a murder happen. I realize the night is probably here to protect me from whatever that thing I just saw was. It's vaguely similar in design to the slime I saw earlier in... Where exactly did I see that slime again? It's sunset now, and I'm walking slower than I did before. I suppose it has been a long day. What was it that bird told me? That I needed something in order to keep going, that I needed... love, was it? What is this? What is love? The next thing I know, my face hits the grass. Nobody sees this happen. Nobody knows that I've just died for the second time, alone on the way back to the house of the only person who ever acknowledged me. Clarity is knowing that when Mami Tomoe was attacked, she didn't die. Clarity is knowing she died the moment she asked Kyubei for help. Clarity is knowing that her soul died not when she was attacked, not when she was violently mauled by a witch in the labyrinth, but when this happened. The horror of this isn't that Mami Tomoe was killed. It's knowing that until that moment, she was still alive to see it happen. 3 times I almost feel like I'm making progress. There's a beautiful girl at the flower shop. There are guards in the castle of the king. The king is willing to see me in the early afternoon. The baker makes bread. The baker makes bread at the bakery every morning. There's a guy who sells trinkets I probably need but can't afford. I have no idea where I am. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Something has to be wrong, right? How can I make a difference like this? I fall, and my face scrapes the floors of the castle. Each time I wake up, I hear Claire de Lune once more, and I know that I have to try. I have to try my best to understand the world I've ended up in. You already know about what happens in Puella Magi Madoka Magica. You know that it's a so-called deconstruction now, thanks to those words being echoed in all corners of the anime fandom. We all know Madoka Magica tears its source genre limb from limb. We don't question why witches exist, why magical girls exist, or why Kyubey is there the first time through Madoka Magica, because we think we already know what we're getting into. Fiction is easy that way. Eventually, because we understand authors, because we understand ourselves, we can, if we're willing to try hard enough, come to an understanding of what we see. And if we can't, it's okay, because fiction isn't meant to be real. War, on the other hand, war between people, between nations, I will never understand why that happens. Spec Ops: The Line makes itself intentionally easy to understand at first. A series of terrible sandstorms have overtaken Dubai, and while the elite had no trouble escaping the dry ocean's tidal waves of heat and decay, there are many still trapped in the city who aren't so lucky. That's where the 33rd comes in. Led by a decorated war hero, a man named John Conrad, the soldiers of the 33rd defy military orders in an attempt to aid evacuation efforts on their way home from Afghanistan. You are not a part of the 33rd's failed evacuation efforts. When soldiers attack you in the ruined desert city, you fight back. You fight because you've received a distress signal, one telling you that a very important mission has ended in complete failure, one where casualties abound.
This is Colonel John Conrad, United States Army. Evacuation of Dubai ended in complete failure. Death toll, too many.
The game's a military shooter, so you do what you have to save people and get to the bottom of things. You find, as you explore, some things that don't make sense. American soldiers ordering around a group of civilians from the city, likely gearing up to execute them. These are signs that someone among your ranks, some terrible members of the United States military, that they've betrayed the cause. In the maddening heat, they've gone to war with themselves. As such, there's only one thing left to do. Playing as a soldier named Walker, you must fight the rebel Americans and restore freedom to the desert. Only then can you reasonably aid in the evacuations. Let them say what they will. They have already decided what side of the line is theirs.
Shit! Return fire! They will kill us if we don't! Now open fire!
I think we're clear.
What about the civilians? 33rd get away with any of them?
Yeah, they did.
Don't need a translator to know they're hurting.
What are they saying now?
These people want us gone.
We should get out of here and leave these people to grieve.
Yeah, I think that's the least we can do. Come on.
You don't question why this fight happens. You should. See, Spec Ops: The Line isn't just some old shooting game from a once moderately loved series. Spec Ops: The Line is an examination of the horrors of war, PTSD, and how one simple mistake in the heat of the moment can lead to an outcome more horrific and nightmarish than you could ever possibly imagine. All of that begins the moment that Walker chooses to use white phosphorus to attack the American soldiers he believes have chosen to betray him. White phosphorus, in case you didn't know, will kill you. And when you die, it will be in one of the worst possible ways. The game forces you to walk through this. After you ignorantly decide that you know what you're doing and you bomb an entire group of people, Spec Ops: The Line forces upon you a digital version of a sight no one should ever have to see, unless they were the ones who caused it. In this moment, Spec Ops: The Line is going to show you what hell looks like. A hell that you, the player, have just deemed a worthy punishment for a group of people you ultimately know nothing about. Now, it says, with a grim, honest expression, you're going to bear witness to the things that you've done. You're going to walk through this nightmare among the people you've just executed, and while they draw their final breaths, you're going to listen to them. You're going to hear their last desperate cries for help. You're going to realize then, says the line, that this is too much.
Let's just keep moving.
God, please, help!
Walker, come on, man. There's nothing we can do.
Mistake just doesn't seem to cover something of this magnitude. In reality, though, that's all it was. A terrible, terrible, costly mistake. Now, I'm not the first person to bring this game up, and I know that. Really, I'm not the first person to bring up Madoka Magica either. I'm actually making this under the assumption that you've already seen videos on both, which is why I'm trying very hard to not just recap the story for you, and instead to focus on moments within the story that are of considerable impact, that I have strong personal experience with, and that I feel I can convey in a style that is unique to me. I try very hard to not just recap things anyway, at least not without a lot of in-depth analysis into how our favorite pieces of media do what they do, and the meaning we can take from them. Now, that being the case, I know you've heard about the white phosphorus scene before you got to this part of the video. Spec Ops: The Line definitely isn't as little known as it used to be, and I, for one, think that's pretty fantastic. It's great that powerful pieces of deconstructive art are making the rounds more frequently these days, but given that we all know the scene already, and if you didn't, you know now, thanks to me ruining it for you, let me ask you something. Do you know why the game uses white phosphorus? Sorry, trick question. What I meant to ask was, do you know why the game sometimes fades to white instead of black? Based on online discussion about the game, as well as discussions I've had with other people who've played it, the general consensus is that Spec Ops: The Line fades to black when the game enters a normal loading state. Nothing new for video games here. The game fades to white, however, whenever something is about to happen that isn't entirely real. Something Walker is, for lack of a better word, hallucinating. Take the moment someone else's face is seen on a random soldier in a building immediately following a fade to white, for example. Obviously, that didn't happen. There's no shape-shifting evil soldier monster in the game, of course, but it's what we, through Walker's eyes, saw. Spec Ops: The Line peppers its story with things like this. Conrad is the one in charge of the 33rd, so surely something deeper must be going on and he must be in charge of it, right? Something Walker alone must put a stop to. As players, we slowly learn that the real monster isn't Conrad at all, but Walker. He's confused, maddened by what he believed he had to do, and in his confusion, his desperation to become a war hero like his own hero, John Conrad, Walker committed a genocide with white phosphorus. The game fades to white whenever a hallucination or warped perception of the events moving forward will lead to Walker making another mistake in Dubai. It fades to white to remind us of white-hot, burning phosphorus, and the pain and suffering so many innocent people are going through, and have gone through, because we waltzed in with no idea what we were doing or where the real danger was. The voice of John Conrad even says as much later on in the game.
I thought my duty was to protect this city from the storm. I was wrong. I have to protect it from you.
Every good deconstruction has a moment that I've come to call the rug pull. ReZero does this right away with Subaru Natsuki's lack of powers and immediate death. Moon pulls the rug the moment you realize who that armor-clad monster is and the true depth of the harm he's done to the world and its gentle, innocent inhabitants. Madoka Magica pulls the rug the moment Mami Tomoe is brutally killed by Charlotte, the Sweets Witch. By the way, I know the witch's name is Charlotte because of the subtitles that always appear below the witches each time one appears. The script here is incredibly cryptic, and fans of Madoka Magica have spent years decoding it to determine the name of each and every one of the show's main witches, which is just one of the many deep lore secrets. Puella Magi Madoka Magica hides behind a secret code. What I find especially interesting, and I promise we'll move on from this before too long, I just really wanted to talk about this, and I don't see myself doing it anywhere else in the video, so I'm going to do it here, is the sheer amount of connections to German culture, folklore, and even physical locations, like the shopping mall Sayaka and Madoka go to being based on a real shopping mall from Cologne, Germany, for example. Typically, architecture in anime is based on real locations anyway. So this isn't a huge surprise or anything, but it's more common to see these things based on Japanese architecture. It's a surprise, surprise. And that makes connections to places in Germany and even outside of Germany. The show's connections to places like Dubai all the more peculiar. But back to Germany, the script mentioned earlier is actually a German cryptogram. And German cryptograms are like a whole thing, but basically they're word puzzles. If you somehow figure out how to decode these rejects from the Enigma machine, you'll eventually end up with German text which, once translated into English, explains a whole lot of what's going on, such as the show's very opening, reading, once translated, Prologue in Heaven 2011. And of course, each of the witches' names, as well as a bunch of other stuff, like the text that actually appears during the fights against the witches. Now, I'm not going to spoil all of it for you here, but just as an example, look at this. That's insane dedication to solving the mysteries of a show right there. And believe it or not, the references to German go even deeper than that, since a lot of these runes and cryptograms end up translating to direct quotes from the story of Faust, a story which is rather fitting for this anime in particular, seeing as how it's a story about making a deal with the devil. They actually use these quotes to foreshadow the end of the story too, like this quote found in episode 2, which, after translation, reads, "Woe, woe, thou hast destroyed it. This lovely world thou but crushed into ruin. It totters, reels, and falls. A demigod has crushed it. Mournfully we bear its fragments off to vacancy, and weep over its ruined beauty." This is describing the end of the show, after Madoka has completed her ascension to godhood and destroyed the fabric of the universe. That's why the city we see at the show's conclusion is modern-day Tokyo, whereas the world we see before that is made up of nothing but the best and proudest achievements of human architecture from across the world, almost implying that Madoka has done more harm than good to the world, something even further emphasized by the wraiths in the desert at the end of everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Where were we? Oh, right. The moment Mami Tomoe is taken by the witch, everything about Madoka Magica changes. Not just because it's a sudden and unexpected death, either. Because up until episode 3, Madoka Magica has simply been constructing. Putting together a happy, light-hearted magical girl anime series. After this moment, Madoka Magica immediately and permanently shifts gears. From this point on, Puella Magi Madoka Magica has officially become a deconstruction. Everyone describes Puella Magi Madoka Magica the same way. Puella Magi Madoka Magica, they say, is a deconstruction of the magical girl subgenre. The problem with that statement isn't that it's wrong. As we've discussed up until now, it really isn't. Madoka Magica takes the pieces of a magical girl show, the powers, the villains, the oddly specific age group, and gender exclusivity typical of the magical girl genre, the pieces its typical audience never questions, and it gives them answers. It gives us answers to the questions we didn't know that we had. Like Bakemonogatari, Moon, or Spec Ops The Line, Puella Magi Madoka Magica asks its audience to think about why things are happening this way. And what, in our real world where nothing is ever as simple as make a wish and help other people, would lead to any of this happening in the first place. Sakura eats a lot, because that's what an anime protagonist does. But actually, she eats a lot because she knows what it's like to go hungry, to be alone. She threatens Sayaka Miki and questions her, pushes her buttons, tells her to be selfish, because that's what a rival does in anime. But actually, because she knows all too well what Sayaka is going through, and wants to save her before it's too late. When she tells her to make the man she loves reliant on her by force, tells her what she could do to make sure what she actually wanted comes to pass, it sounds incredibly harsh and painful.
You could bust in there right now and break his arms and legs so bad he'll never be able to use them again. Make him so helpless he won't be able to do anything without you.
But she's not being evil in this scene. She's just rightfully accusing Sayaka Miki of having ulterior motives when she healed him. She never really wanted him out of the hospital, because now she's got no reason to go and see him. Now, she has to be brave and face her feelings, which is something Sayaka Miki was never strong enough to do, even when faced with definitive opposition.
That gives you one day to decide. Will you confess your true feelings to him, or won't you?
Sayaka Miki could not resolve herself to speak up for herself, which is what her true wish was all along, and why her story feels so tragic. In any other magical girl show, this gesture might have worked, and Sayaka might have got what she wanted, but Madoka Magica deconstructs this concept by pointing out the dangers of assuming you know what's best for someone else, of deciding that it's your right to accomplish their goals for them. In the end, what Sayaka did was wrong. And it wasn't so black and white as she'd like us to believe it was, either. Sakura's comparison sounds much worse at first, but the more you think about it, the more you realize that healing him and expecting his love in return is just as bad as the alternative. It is emotionally manipulative. Over and over again, we are told that Sayaka should not make the wish that she makes, that she should be sure she knows exactly why she's doing it, that she should get to the heart of her wish. Madoka Magica argues that Sayaka's actions are unhealthy, that unless she's sure of herself and what she really wants to gain from this, that she will regret it. When she foolishly wishes for Kyosuke's hand to heal anyway, and later bears witness to the world's darker truths that question her simplified binary beliefs, she doesn't have the foundation to protect herself against the breakdown that follows. She doesn't believe in herself enough to ignore the men on the train, and as a result, her ideals quickly crumble, and Sayaka Miki transforms into a witch. By asking where witches come from, why they need to be fought, and why Kyubey would grant a wish in exchange for doing so, Puella Magi Madoka Magica is flipping genre conventions, things about magical girl shows the audience simply accepts as part of the show before even beginning one, on their heads. Each reveal hits twice as hard, when in hindsight we wonder why we didn't question why all of this was happening in the first place. How things could possibly be this bad and why they ever had to get that way to begin with. Puella Magi Madoka Magica is the definition of a deconstruction, and everybody knows it. That's exactly why today we shouldn't call Madoka Magica a deconstruction. We shouldn't give away the surprises of a series that, from the very beginning, tried so hard to hide its true nature, to surprise us, that it tried to hide its main staff, and forced one of its main staff to lie to its audience in order to keep the secret safe. What right do we have to now reveal its secrets to those who have not yet seen it? What right do we have to give them reason to question everything before they even go in? Because if you question everything, if you know to question things before you even go into the show, you will never understand why Madoka Magica is special. If we hadn't told people to go in blind to Doki Doki Literature Club, and it had instead immediately called it a deconstruction of the dating sim, what surprises would it have held for any of us? If we hadn't told people to go into Undertale blind and try not to kill anything, what exactly would they have had to gain from that experience? How would they have been surprised by a deconstruction they knew was coming? And how would that have affected both of those games' existence in modern pop culture? Every time we use the word deconstruction, we rob Puella Magi Madoka Magica of what makes it so special. This is a graph showcasing the history of the words deconstruction and anime used together and searched over time. Wow! Look at that spike. When we account for localization taking longer back then than it does today, you'll notice that this graph perfectly lines up with the moment Madoka Magica began to enter the public conscious in the West. Yes, this show did come out in 2011, but the Blu-rays containing the now iconic English dub were released in early 2012, almost exactly when the spike on the graph begins to appear. Trying to determine who it was that first called the series a deconstruction of the magical girl genre is a long and difficult process, but whoever it was, the results of that rapidly spreading terminology would come to deconstruct the very idea of both Madoka Magica and the term deconstruction. Madoka Magica is not a deconstruction because it introduces dark twists. Magical Girl Sight or Magical Girl Raising Project, for example, would not fall under the same umbrella of deconstruction. Those are just pseudo-dark magical girl shows. Madoka Magica is a deconstruction because it takes apart and analyzes what makes a magical girl show a magical girl show. It also just happens to have dark and grim elements and uses them to explore the genre even further. Like I said before you can understand what a deconstruction is, you must first understand exactly what it isn't. Mami Tomoe's death is not deconstructive. It's horrific, scary, and it changes how we look at the world of the show, but it isn't deconstructive. The ending song changing after this happens to be more grim and unsettling, culminating with the image of Madoka as a witch opening her eye and looking directly at us after showing her walk directly past all those tragic stories she would eventually rewrite, is not deconstructive. It's cool, I like it, but it's not deconstructive. The soul gems containing someone's actual soul, however, accounting for why regular humans can suddenly take serious hits and get back up, the removal of the soul from the body to make them better fighters, that is deconstructive. It takes a genre-specific plot hole, typical of shows of this type, and breaks it down and analyzes it. It asks us to question something we've never questioned before, the laws of the universe. Cube being short for incubator, the cute animal curating and controlling all of this for his own purposes, for the purposes of entropy, for the sake of the universe. That is deconstructive.
If you ever feel like dying for the sake of the universe, call me. I'll be waiting.
It asks us to question the way this world works, and it makes us rethink the way we look at stories like this moving forward. That's what makes Madoka Magica a deconstruction, and not just a dark take on a magical girl show. Now that said, that doesn't make it perfect. I don't necessarily think the explanation for why it's always teenage girls was satisfactory or correct, but it's also proven that Kyubei's kind isn't always correct or all-knowing, so in a way, Madoka Magica calls him out on that by the end by proving that the incubator's method wasn't exactly the correct one. It does, however, also show us that abandoning that way of life leads to a much less advanced world, as the previously mentioned cityscape in the series finale concludes. So it could go either way, really. There were better ways of collecting energy, and those ways are, as we see, eventually implemented. We just bore witness to one particular method which was very flawed for the sake of genre deconstruction, which doesn't really bother me all that much in the grand scheme of things, but I still wish it could have been handled slightly differently so as to not really come off as sexist.
That's correct.
Which is ultimately about the same as the Wonder Egg priority situation when you get right down to it.
That's correct.
Also, just as a note here, I haven't seen Rebellion, and I'm not talking about anything else that got introduced to the series after the movies came out. In terms of Madoka Magica as a standalone series without the benefit of post-mortem content like the movies or Magi a Record, this is how the show deconstructs the magical girl genre on its own. That's what it really means to be a deconstruction. Take elements standard of the genre and break them apart. It doesn't have to be dark in order to do that. Madoka Magica just happens to be both dark and deconstructive, as does the line. Moon, on the other hand, isn't quite so horrific, but it is equally deconstructive. I wake up in a house that feels familiar, and I hear Claire de Lune play once more. I realize I've been given another shot. I talk to Granby, and she gives me a bag of cookies. I like Granby. Granby is nice to me. She asks me to buy her some bread from the bakery. I decide to go there first. I see the corpse of a slime on the ground. My head hurts as I try to remember why it's there. I meet a bird in the town square. His name is Yoshida.
Hey man, hey, you know what the most important thing in the world is? It's love, my friend. Buddy, if you ain't got love, you'll stop breathing and pass the heck out. For real, man, it's game over, like, for your life. So keep that in mind. See you later, buddy.
I wonder again what love is, and to give myself time to think it over, I pause the game. There are hearts there. I bet this is what Yoshida was talking about before. As I make my way to the bakery, I'm surprised by how many people almost recognize me. They look at me. They probably smile. Then again, maybe they don't. I see the armored monster run around a bit. He frightens me. I fear his unpredictable nature. The woman at the bar is asleep. The woman at the flower shop is named Flora. She's beautiful. The trash hobo guy sounds kind of like Danny DeVito when he talks.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
I check my inventory. I find the bag of cookies. When I eat it, the heart gets a little brighter. Suddenly, I realize that I can use this to stay alive. Yoshida told me I could find love all over just by walking around. I'm not exactly sure what he means by that, since I've yet to find any for myself. I guess I'll just keep walking and figure it out as I go. The baker's shop is open when I arrive, and after a quick knock, he tells me to come in. I buy bread for my Granby, and I pray I can make it back to her house alive. The town is amazing. It's full of people and life. Everyone here has a schedule, a system that they follow to a T. I'm walking slower now. Maybe I should have saved those cookies for when I needed them. Maybe I can still make it back in time to give her the bread. Maybe. I fall to the ground, and everything goes dark. This happens at least 3 more times before I finally start to put together what it is that I should be doing. Cookies restore some love. I need love in order to stay alive. Without it, it's game over. Like, for my life. Croissants also restore some love.
Are you going to finish that croissant?
Yes. I can sleep anytime I want at Granby's house for as long as I want. Each new day, Granby gives me a new bag of freshly baked cookies. I sleep for 4 straight days to ensure I have enough cookies for what comes next. I buy the bread immediately, and then I wonder if there's enough yenum left over to buy a croissant roll to keep myself alive. There is. I go straight home to Granby's house with a pastry shop's worth of baked goods stuffed directly into my pockets. When I give Granby the bread, I feel like I'm making progress. I never make it very far into town past this. I eventually meet the king, and he gives me a card, a business card. He says I can use the card to get other cards, as exchanging business information is how the people of this world interact with each other, how they introduce themselves. No wonder they all seemed so afraid of me earlier. I meet a little man made out of toys. His name is Noge. He says he is studying abroad. He asks me what my favorite toy is, and I tell him it's my precious game station. He asks if he can borrow it someday. I say he can, and in exchange, he lends me his favorite toy. I cherish the gesture, and soon afterwards, I collapse again into the ground. When I wake up, Noge and I have never met. Playing Moon this way, I learned so much about the world that never cared about me. I met and interacted with characters, experienced, in some cases, entire adventures with people, formed relationships, and progressed. But I could never make it back to the house before my action limit. The love I had to spare gave out, and everything I did was suddenly erased. I've had dreams about this kind of experience. I have very vivid dreams. Often full worlds and lifetimes will go by in the span of 8 hours. I always know that I'm an outsider to these dreamy landscapes I visit in my sleep, in my incredibly lucid dreams. I know because I remember my dreams more than most, at least as far as I know. Many of these experiences are very special to me. As a result, I won't be sharing them here, but some of them scare me, because I know I've already forgotten them. The idea that you could live an entire life, that you could have, at any point, gone on a lifetime's worth of adventures only to wake up and be normal again, and never think about the people you met or the incredible things you saw ever again. That I myself have forgotten my own life. That kind of experience can be crippling. In Adventure Time, there's this episode where Finn and Jake build a pillow fort. Finn gets lost in the pillows and eventually happens upon a pillow universe, a world and kingdom where he becomes a crucial role, where he has a family, children, a legacy. At the end of his life there, he finds a way out and resumes his life with Jake as if nothing happened. He soon forgets anything ever did, and the Pillow Land is never mentioned again in the entire series. That is the feeling of being a side character in someone else's time loop. Time loops are hell. Living the same events and being unable to grow or learn from any of them. Being bound by the laws of an endlessly repeating cycle. Being unable to ever move forward. That is precisely why we care so deeply for the plight of Miss Homura Akemi. The girl who wished to turn back time to save her only friend, Madoka Kaname, who again and again lived the same month in anticipation of a way to defeat the most vile witch who would ever live, the great and terrible Walpurgisnacht. In failure after failure, Homura Akemi tries everything to save her, to do something different, until eventually she is so consumed by the terror she has beheld that she decides to stop trying to save her as her friend, and start trying to save her as a stoic, angry, powerful, magical girl. A girl willing to use force to keep everyone around her safe from the dark reality of life as a Mahou Shoujo. Inadvertently, in so doing, Homura Akemi only makes Madoka Kaname's potential more potent, with so many timelines, so many worlds, all converging on her. Madoka has the power no other girl has ever had before. Madoka Kaname has the power to violate karmic destiny and become a god. In the end, when the world in rubble falls, its last life choked out by Walpurgisnacht, it is Madoka Kaname who makes the contract and, bringing things full circle, saves Homura Akemi from a witch with her magical powers, just like she did all those loops ago. One day, at the end of everything, Homura Akemi will again face darkness. But she'll do it knowing that she's not alone. The memory of Madoka Kaname disappears from the world. Her entire life becomes nothing to anyone she knew. In the inverse of forgetting an entire life's worth of experiences, Madoka Kaname's life is forgotten by all who used to know her, her family, her friends, everyone, except for Homura Akemi. And life goes on. I wake up again to Claire de Lune in my Granby's house. And that's when I realized that Moon has a player's manual. A manual most who experienced the game, myself included, recommend you read before you spend 14 in-game days trying and failing to survive your first 24 hours in Moon's world. Turns out, this red dash here tells me exactly when I'm going to collapse. Something that can be prevented by eating snacks every so often, just as I'd discovered on my own. The line in the clock is what time it is currently, but the dash tells me the exact moment that I will stop moving forever. At least forever until I wake back up to Claire de Lune in my Granby's house after falling unceremoniously to the ground. It taught me a lot more about the game too, information which I used to explore this incredible world and find therein fulfillment in some of the most incredible stories I've ever experienced in any game. Eventually, thanks to that manual, I did progress. And I did save. On my own, now knowing enough about the world to get by within it, and knowing enough about its people to write autobiographies about each of them with encyclopedic detail and accuracy, I explored the world by its own rules. I learned that the shop sells different merchandise at night. The baker, who drinks every Echo Day night, splurging his yenim on alcohol to the point that the bartender, Miss Wanda, tells him that even his bread sometimes tastes just a little like the brandy he downs at her bar, holds a secret that changed completely how I saw what I had initially believed was just another baker in just another RPG, whose head was shaped like a loaf of freshly baked bread because that's adorable. After observing him, after seeing every action of every person in this town for literal weeks, I knew exactly what to do with my time on Echo Day night next. I followed him after he left Wanda's bar in the wee hours of the morning, a time so early that the sky is still black as though it were night. Baker stumbled back to his humble home and workplace, and Baker, in his drunken state, forgot to lock his door. I walked in after him. While as a hero in an RPG I could go anywhere at any time, now as a little clump of clothes with no power, with nothing I could use to force my way into places I want to see, I had to resort to taking advantage of a drunken man, a poor baker, because he wouldn't let me just waltz on into the back of his shop like I owned the place. Because I don't own the place. I found him collapsed in the back. I expected him to be angry with me, but he seemed happy to see me. And then as he stood there, as I waited, Baker told me everything.
So that's fire? Thank correct. Still your most endearing week. I'm the reason they were having royal what don't happen. Property of the Greek element. I'm the reason having a stove. Tank minus tank corrected. Another endearing weakness, royal. Another seal of velocity. Tank corrected. Still your royal what I don't. Property of the Greek mentality. Property of the Greek mentality. I'm the reason the property of royal what don't happen. Stop. So that's fire, tank minus. So that's fire, tank minus tank. Having a stove.
For once, it wouldn't matter if I died before getting home. Baker wouldn't remember me anyway. Baker, too, knows what it's like to be trapped like Homura Akemi in an endless time loop. Later, I met a man named Doolittle. He asked me how watching the monster destroy the helpless slime made me feel. I was honest with him. Honest like I was when I cried and told Granby everything. And what happened next melted my heart. He told me that there was a way to help. I won't spoil Moon for you. In fact, I won't say another word about its pacing or its characters or its world. Moon is a deconstruction. One just as powerful and engaging as Puella Magi Madoka Magica, and one with a heart of gold. It's not very well known, so there aren't many resources out there to help you if you get lost during your playthrough, but I think that's what makes the game feel so special. You'll struggle, and you'll fail at first, yes, but eventually, Moon will teach you what it means to deconstruct a genre. Outside of that, you probably won't hear me speak of Moon ever again. I will not discuss it further. I will not ruin this once-in-a-lifetime experience for you. If you want to know what happens next, well, here's where you can find it. Enjoy. And know that I am not going to tolerate any spoilers about this game in the comments of this video if you do play it. The game's too important for that. I will, however, spoil the ending of Spec Ops: The Line, just so that at least some of our final loose ends can be conveniently tied up. Towards the latter end of the game's campaign, Walker and crew are on a helicopter, shooting away at enemy choppers and saving their own skin. Observant players will quickly realize that this is the moment they played as the game's opening cutscene. Observant players, however, are not the only ones who take notice.
Wait, this isn't right!
It's too late now!
No, I mean, we did this already!
What do you mean?
Fuck it! Stop it! Just shake these fucking guys!
You got it!
And all of a sudden it becomes clear that something not quite right is going on. Something far more sinister than a few double takes will be able to solve.
High five.
Walker chose to barge into the Dubai situation because he wanted to be seen as a hero. He wanted to feel like he was doing what's right, and he wanted to accomplish his mission. In the aftermath of the white phosphorus disaster, Dubai is in a definitively worse place than it was when Walker arrived. And unable to cope with the mistake he made and the lives it cost, Walker now needs someone else to take the blame. Conrad. Surely, this was all part of the PTSD-stricken military man's master scheme, wasn't it? Surely, our brave hero Walker and his humble squad were tricked, bamboozled, by someone whose mind has been in no doubt irreparably twisted and corroded by the horrors of war. We hear his voice, we see his face. We know that something deep and evil is happening, and that we need to do something, anything, about it. So we fight on to stop the tyrant and rescue the fallen desert city from his clutches. We fight because this is a third-person shooter. We fight because we know we must be the hero. In the game's final moments, it becomes clear that Conrad has been dead for a long time. That Walker created him as a way to help himself run from what he knew almost immediately was simply too much. Spec Ops: The Line asks of its players at the end of the game to make a choice, to lay the judgment blow upon the true villain of the story. But is it Conrad we choose? Or is it Walker?
Colonel, please.
What's going on, Walker?
It's Conrad. He did it. All of it.
You needed someone to blame, so you cast it on me. A dead man. I know the truth is hard to hear, Walker, but it's time. You're all that's left, and we can't live this lie forever. I'm going to count to 5, then I'm pulling the trigger.
You're not real. This is all in my head.
Are you sure? Maybe it's in mine. 1.
No. Everything.
All this. It was your fault. That's what you believe, then shoot me. 2.
I didn't mean to hurt anybody.
No one ever does, Walker. 3. 4. matter how hard I tried, I never could escape the reality of what happened here. That was my downfall. There, finished. I hope you like it.
What the hell is going on?
Your eyes are opening for the first time. It hurts, doesn't it?
Either way, it becomes clear that Walker, too, has been gone for a very long time. He's in a time loop, experiencing and reliving the events that broke him, that made him into a monster. In this way, Spec Ops: The Line shows us what it means to deconstruct a genre. It takes established tropes and set pieces that it knows we won't question because of the type of game this is, and it breaks them down and analyzes them. Time loops are hell. And in the end, that's exactly where Walker has ended up.
I should have died long ago.
When the flag waves on the title screen, a title screen which changes depending on how far into the story you've come, it all comes full circle. The upside-down flag is not a sign of hope. After all, the flag flying inverted is only to be used, as per non-legally enforceable US flag code, a signal of dire distress in instance of extreme danger to life or property. As our time together draws to yet another close, longer for some than for others, I find myself asking, why do we love Deconstructions? Is it because they show us tormented characters, fates worse than death, hell beyond what we could possibly imagine? Or is it simply because we enjoy good world building? Because we crave deeper dives into aspects of our favorite genres and stories that we could never have done on our own? Is it just because we enjoy the crippling terror we feel when thrust into the darkness of Spec Ops: The Line or Madoka Magica? Well, while I can't answer that for you, I have found an answer for myself that I at least find satisfactory. One that I feel helps me understand the genre, as well as myself, a little better. We love Deconstructions because Deconstructions help us understand our mistakes and encourage us to put forth the effort necessary to correct them. That was hint number 3. Here at the end, I humbly recommend to you all of the media I've in detail discussed today, and I hope that you enjoy exploring their thought-provoking chasms for yourself along the way. It is unlikely that you'll hear from me again for a while, for my next project is already underway and is, as you'd expect, quite large and very involved. For now, however, I shall leave you all with a question. If a strange animal approached you and asked you in a time of great personal distress to make with it a contract to fight against evil and experience the magic you never knew existed, knowing all the while that if you said yes, your entire existence could very well be torn to shreds as the world and all that's in it collapsed around you. If you knew what was going to happen to you in the end, what would you wish for?
No matter what happens next, don't be too hard on yourself. Even now, for all you've done, you can still go home. Lucky you.
What now, sir?
Huh?
The men are asking. What do we do now?
We complete our mission.
And what mission would that be, sir?
Just get me a goddamn radio. This is Captain Martin Walker. Requesting immediate evacuation of Dubai. Survivors,